Every 4 years, the world shows up. But this summer, the world is showing up at their house. And for the first time since 1994, that house belongs to the United States. Think about what that actually means, not as a statistic, as a feeling. 80,000 Americans screaming for a team that has spent decades trying to prove it belongs. That kind of pressure doesn't just motivate you, it can swallow you whole. But here's what I keep coming back to. History, cold, indifferent, 100-year-old history is actually on their side. 6 nations have won the World Cup on home soil. 6. Uruguay in 1930, Italy in 1934, England in 1966, West Germany in 1974, Argentina in 1978, France in 1998. That is not a coincidence. That is a pattern. Host nations reach the semifinals at more than double the rate of non-hosts. They win the whole thing at nearly double the expected probability. The data doesn't lie. Something real happens when a team plays in front of its own country. And it goes beyond crowd noise or familiar stadiums. It gets into players' heads. It changes what they believe is possible. And that belief, in knockout football, it might be the most important variable of all. But before we get carried away, let's be honest about where this team actually is. Because the honest answer is more interesting than either the hype or the doubt. Christian Pulisic finished the Serie A season with 8 goals and 4 assists for AC Milan. Not a down year, a genuinely solid season for a player operating in one of Europe's most competitive leagues. What's telling, though, is the end of the season, a stretch of limited minutes, tactical rotation, the quiet kind of form dip that doesn't make headlines but shows up in the data. And then, in the final days of May, he played 45 minutes against Senegal in the U.S. team's first World Cup warm-up match and scored. 1 goal, 1 assist. That's not a coincidence. I've watched Pulisic long enough to know he reserves something for these moments, something that doesn't show up in club football. The national team jersey does something to him. It always has. Now, here's the part that genuinely surprised me when I dug into it. This attack, as a unit, might be better than anything the U.S. has ever sent to a World Cup. Think about that claim carefully. Folarin Balogun scored 19 goals across all competitions for Monaco this season. He's 24 years old. He's not a prospect anymore. He's a striker that opponents game plan around. A striker you expect to score, not just hope will score. That distinction sounds small. In tournament football, it's enormous. And then there's the depth. Ricardo Pepi with 13 international goals. Tim Weah in Marseille. Gio Reyna, injury history and all, at his healthiest in years. I went back and checked the rosters from 2002, 2014, 2022. I don't think any of those squads could match this in the final third. That's not sentiment, that's just the numbers. But here's what this video is really about. Not just who's on the roster, it's about what history says about this specific opportunity and why the window might be narrower than it looks. If you're enjoying this breakdown, drop a like. This channel runs on that, and we're just getting started. The 1994 World Cup, the US hosted. They had never felt that kind of home support. They made it out of the group stage for the first time in 64 years. Then they faced Brazil in the round of 16 on the 4th of July. 84,000 in the stadium, 28 million watching on television, and lost 1-0 to the eventual champions. That team wasn't good enough to go further, and they knew it. Here in 2026, the question is whether this group is, because the structure has changed. The tournament has expanded to 48 teams. Qualification to the round of 32 is more achievable than ever. Group D, Paraguay, Australia, Turkey, is genuinely winnable. The road exists. The question is whether they have the legs to walk it all the way. Tyler Adams anchoring the midfield, when healthy, is as good as anything the U.S. has ever had at that position. Weston McKennie at Juventus had one of his better seasons. 12 international goals for his country. Box-to-box energy that can change the character of a match. But there are only 2 of them. One injury, one yellow card accumulation, and the engine room becomes a problem. That midfield depth, or lack of it, is the single legitimate tactical concern that I can't argue away. I've tried. Anthony Robinson at Fulham and Chris Richards at Crystal Palace give this team a defensive spine built on Premier League football week in, week out. That's new. That matters in a way that sometimes gets lost in the conversation about the attacking talent. You win tournaments with structure, not just flair. Here's the honest prediction, because I think the honest version is actually the compelling one. Group stage, 2 wins, 1 draw, through comfortably. Round of 32, they advance. Then comes the quarterfinal wall. That's where history says the gap appears. Not in the group stage, not in the early knockouts, but when the elite European sides arrive with their depth and their experience and their 12 months of Champions League football. That's where the US has historically met its ceiling. But, and this is the part I've actually changed my mind on in the past year, ceilings aren't fixed. This generation has played more high-level club football than any American squad in history. Pulisic has won the Champions League. He has played at the highest level in Europe for a decade. That experience doesn't just belong to him. It travels with him into that locker room, and it changes the standard of what these players expect from themselves. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next piece of this story is about what happens when that expectation meets the weight of a home crowd. It's a different kind of pressure than anything a training camp can prepare you for. The World Cup doesn't care about potential. It doesn't care about narratives or golden generations or what any of us believed was coming. It only cares about what happens on the field in 90 minutes when everything is on the line. And this summer, for the first time in 32 years, the United States gets to find out exactly what they're made of, at home, in front of the country, with history quietly, stubbornly pointing in their direction. So the question is simple. Is this the generation that finally breaks through, or the one that made us believe it was possible and broke our hearts instead? Comment below. I'll be reading every single one.